What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the very first episode of the Dirt Life Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Steinrook. I am pleased to be joined today by one of the best announcers in all of New York State, Steve Ovens. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate having you here. I appreciate you for coming on. So let's just get started with your back in the early days of Steve Ovens' life, right? What age did you start getting into racing?
So I got started pretty young. I think I was only a couple weeks old when I got to see my first race. I mean, see my first race as a young pup in the covered bleachers at Dundee Raceway Park, now Outlaw Speedway. So I was kind of born into racing. My whole family was involved. My dad was a street stock competitor and then a go-kart racer, and grew up in the Carrick family, which racing's big in the Carrick clan. So there's been probably 5 to 10 different Carricks that have been out on the racetrack, and seems that we're always adding more. But yeah, that was kind of where it started for me in racing. But racing myself, I started at 6 in go-karts at Frozen Ocean up in Owasco and Paradise in Geneva. And so that's kind of how it got started for me behind the wheel is racing go-karts.
Right? Did anybody influence you into racing? Did you like get pushed into it by family, or were you just ready for it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was pushed into it necessarily, but it was something my dad did and something the family did. So I was always around it. And I think it's one of those things that the more you're around something, the more apt you're gonna be to be involved. And I know traveling to some go-kart races with my dad, I was like, hey man, this is a lot of fun. Like I can't wait until I can do this. We used to work on his go-kart at a particular place that was kind of like a car garage, and they had a couple of old cars out in the parking lot. And I would always sit out in those cars and pretend like I was driving, whether I was driving on the street or racing. And so I think it was just one of those things that I say that I never had a chance, but I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, yeah, I know, Dad always told me and my brother that if at any point you guys don't like this stuff, we'll sell all the racing stuff and we'll go buy a boat and we'll go have fun doing that. And so it was kind of always that thing that we always knew if racing was not fun anymore, that we would find something to do together that didn't involve racing. And I would say, fortunately, we never did find that there was something more fun than racing. We were always involved, and it kind of eventually led into what I do now. If you had asked me back then, when I was racing go karts or racing bigger cars in their youth division at Black Rock and Woodhall and things like that, I would have told you that my career path was race car driver. There was no other thing. And then at some point, as every short track racer figures out, is you're not going to NASCAR. You're not even going higher than your local racetrack. So,
Right.
then at that point it was kind of deciding what to do in life and whether racing was going to be a part of that or not.
And it's tough with the cost of
Yeah.
everything. Because I know back in the day when I was trying to get into it, because Dad raced a lot, it was just we couldn't afford it. So
Yeah.
I got a late start in the racing. I think I started racing when I joined the Navy. I think that was my first race. So it's just the money thing. It was kind of hard.
Yeah.
So I understand there.
No, absolutely. And that's isn't it interesting that when you got started in racing that you consider yourself getting a late start when a lot of now it seems like so many kids are, well, when did you get your start? Well, I started putting around the backyard when I was 3 or 4, and then I started racing go-karts at 5. Like it's unbelievable now, because when you and I were kids, little, there were some of those opportunities there for younger kids. But when our parents were coming up through the sport, a lot of them didn't get started until they were 16. You couldn't even go in the pits until you were 16, much less
Right.
race a car. So the times absolutely, changed very quickly. But at the same time, you're right. The cost thing is kind of what ended my driving career was, I got to a point where, and granted, I made this decision at 17 that costs were too high. Like I was still in high school. I was cutting lawns and if I'll tell you this, if it wasn't for my Uncle Stanley coming and picking me up at my house and allowing me to go up and mow his own lawn for him for 20 bucks a week, I wouldn't have raced as long as I did because, I didn't have enough money to cover a pit pass and oil changes every, couple of races or so. And, and it got really tough. So, for me, the driving career ended when it was time to decide, am I going to be driving race cars or am I going to go to college, try to get a degree? And then hopefully once I get a degree, then I can pay for race cars after that. And um, so that's where it changed for me. It went from, that choice of deciding to go to school. And then when I made that choice and stepped out of the race car, I had a very long time family friend in Mel Thomas that, worked in video.
Uh-huh.
And I remember seeing him at a race or something of that sort. I don't remember exactly how it all came to be, but I remember having a conversation with him somewhere, and I said, I can't afford to race anymore, and he goes, well, you still like racing, don't you? I said, oh, I love racing, like I always will. I just need to take a break. And he said, why don't you come work for us and run a video camera? And I thought, okay. I mean, I was a sports manager for some high school teams when I was in high school. I did all the film work for football, basketball, lacrosse. Like, the team treated me like I was one of their own and got to travel with them and all that stuff. So I worked in video a little bit. And he's like, yeah, come shoot video for us at the racetrack. You'll have a great time. You get to watch the races. And geez, at that time, I think I was making like 40 bucks a night. I thought I was king of the world, man. I was going to the races and I was getting paid to be there. Like, I mean, what for somebody that loves racing, what could be better than that? So, um, that's what got me started on the media side was Mel saying, hey, why don't you come work for me pointing cameras at, God, I was shooting Dundee every week. Um, when I was available, I was going to Oswego with him every week, shooting the pavement up there. And so many miles up and down the road. And then there was times that I would work Dundee Friday, Oswego Saturday, and then I'd have to be back to Geneva to meet Mel to go to Utica Rome on Sunday. So for a while there, we put a lot of miles on that Dodge minivan of Mel's, and to do that with such a great friend. And we had another really good mutual friend in Jack Christensen that used to do the show Chasing Racing on one of the local radio stations, and so we had a mutual friend there. So I will say this, that as long as I live, I will always, always, always be forever grateful for those miles that we put on Mel's van, riding together, telling stories I cannot share on any podcast
I can
many
only
times
imagine with Mel.
from back in his heyday. But yeah, I just and you know what? The one thing that I didn't mention about all that too is um Brad was shooting video with them before I started, so he kind of was already doing some of that work, and so we got to do that together for quite a while, along with working with Mel and Matt and Art Rorick, that is our producer at Canandaigua now. So what great memories, not only riding up and down the road with Mel, but for a lot of these shows that we traveled to, I got to do it with my brother too, which was pretty awesome, especially looking back now.
So did you get any wins over at Black Rock? I know you were in the four cylinders. Did you stack up any wins? That was a field. Did you have Jimmy Grant? You had what Dylan CC?
Yeah.
You had a stacked field there. CC's now a super late model driver. Jimmy Grant's the class of the field in street stocks.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll go back to the bandit class at BlackRock when I started, and people that go to the races now and see the fields that the youth class gets now, they can very easily forget that when guys like Jimmy, myself, Kenny Peoples, Donnie Lawson, when we came up, Richie Sharpstein, when we came up through that bandit class, we had a full field every week, and it was on a handicap system too. So the better that we did, the further back we started. And when I say we got handicapped, you got handicapped to like 16th, 18th. I mean, you're starting out back of the field
Oh yeah.
in a 10-lap race. Like, I look back now and I'm thinking, my God, how on earth did Derek Mills, Eddie Mills's son, Junior, um, Travis Grover, Alex Hogue. I mean, the list of names goes on and on. Brady Foltz that runs modifieds now. The list really goes on and on of guys that have come through those ranks. And so I was fortunate enough to get a win my second year, which is kind of a crazy story. My second year racing, we teamed up with the Watkins Glen Sunburn guy, Kenny Hunt. And so we were teamed up. He ran a car in the adult division. I ran it in the bandit division. Kenny got in a horrific wreck one night. I mean, car was firewall deep in the turn 4 wall, or maybe it was turn 2. Um, and wrecked the car, and we were essentially done. That was all we had for equipment. And a guy by the name of Jack Ayers, his son Brent races Sportsman now. Jack come over and said, um, told my dad, you got a pretty good kid wheeling your race car there. And I'm not sure if my dad sought Jack out to try to get me back into a car, or how that all came about. But the conversation went on. Jack said, hey, he looks like he's got some talent here. Let's put him in our car, let him run the bandit races, and you know uh do his best not to wrinkle it up before Jack's got to go out there in the adults. And so I got to win my second year out. And it's still kind of a blur to me to this day. There was that night, the track, I think we had gotten a lot of rain that night. We barely got the track run back in to be able to race. And, we went out there, and, Jack had a stout car. He really did, like, far superior to whatever we had running at that point. Um, and yeah, so got a win there. And then during that season, the Pavosky boys that do the track work at Outlaw now, uh, we kind of ran into them, and they approached us and said, we're building a brand new car, brand new Machuga chassis. Man, that thing was mint. I'm telling you, that was the best race car I ever drove in my life. They said, we're putting a brand new car together for 2001. We want you to drive it in the Bandits. We're going to have the one brother, Joe, race it in the adult class. And I'm telling you, man, we smoked the field with that car. Joe got a pile of wins. I got 2 wins in it. But what made the difference for me was I was the kind of guy that I'll take a second place. I'll points race you to death. Like, obviously the 2 wins were awesome that year, but I was a points racer. I loved going for those championships. I put a ton of pressure on myself to be consistent and always be there. A third or a fourth place is okay, as long as the guy leading the points or chasing you down isn't the winner. So, um, but yeah, so that was an amazing year. So we won the track championship. I won 3 championships in go-karts as a kid, but that championship at BlackRock was, something that I will always cherish. Something that I feel like in more recent times, Some folks think that championships aren't really a big deal, and I don't subscribe to that at all. I don't care what kind of class you get a track championship, but that's a big deal. Even if it is in the youth bandit class. So I've always felt that way, and as an announcer, that's how I approach it now. Is every win. I don't care if you've won 95 times or if this is your first win or if this is your first championship. Like all of that is really a big deal to me, and I think that in the work that I do as an announcer, I think that that shows. And sometimes um I guess for better or worse, that's what kind of makes me me, is having that background in racing and having that feeling of winning for that very first time or winning that championship. Um, so yeah, so to back to answer your question, so I got 3 wins in bandits, and I did get 1 feature win in the adult 4-cylinder class. We used to have so many 4-cylinders back then; they ran 2 features, and both features were full fields. It was incredible. There's 40 cars a night, um, and and to this day, I still laugh with Phil Yaw. Are you familiar with Phil?
Yeah, NFL.
Hobby stock guy.
Yep.
Used to be an incredible 4-cylinder racer, and he was very good in hobby stocks too. But to this day, I still apologize to Phil Yaw because I chopped the living crap out of him coming to the checkered flag, the one adult feature win that I got. I was loose as a goose. I was so nervous. I'm like, I've got to keep the lead. This is might be my only chance to ever win an adult feature. And he had a run on me coming off of 4. And, at the end of the race, I told him, I'm so sorry. I got loose. I couldn't control the car. I chopped the hell out of him, man. I really did. But you know what? It's again, that was a big deal. You win against all the adults. Like I think that was a big deal for me because, up to that point, the big deal for me was winning the championship in the youth class. So it was kind of I put that extra pressure to say, man, you got to win an adult feature now. Like you got to actually prove you're worth something here. So
Right.
yeah.
And then when you come to that white flag on that last lap, your heart starts beating.
Yeah.
Because when I won my last race there, or my first race in 22 or 20, yeah, 22, my heart was beating. I know
Yeah.
I had Mike Welch behind me there, and my heart was just beating. I almost spun straight head on into the wall at the flag stand because I had one hand up, going like this, had one
Yeah.
hand on the wheel, and the car's still in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, your heart just starts beating. Your mind doesn't think anymore.
No. No, exactly. And I look back, I look back on that race and I look at that last lap that I ran and I'm like, I almost gave it away. Like I almost gave it away in turns 1 and 2, and then somehow got a nice run through 3, and then here he comes off of 4 again. Like you're right. You kind of and too, I think when you're going for that first one, it's even worse. Like you're trying to do something you've never done before, and yeah, the nerves are crazy, and all of a sudden you're not hitting your marks, you're not running your line. You're just in survival mode. Like just get me to the checkered flag, for crying out loud.
Right. That's the biggest thing. And your son has a win at Land of Legends and a track championship. I'll say in the powder or Power Wheels division, right?
Yeah, he's run it twice now, and yeah, he has a lot of fun with that. This past year we kind of upgraded him to a Jeep, and funny story about that, we put a wing on the back of his Jeep that is from one of my go-karts from 30 years ago. We were able to dig that out, and Casey Pavlik, that used to run Sportsman, and until a couple of years ago, he's one of several very very talented fabrication guys that I know a little closer to where I am here in Horseheads, and I sent him a picture one day and I said, I've got an idea. I am not good with fabrication stuff. Like I'm great with media stuff, but when it comes to that hands-on stuff, I try real hard, but I'm Very good. I said, I've got an idea. I want to put this wing on the back of my kid's Power Wheels car. He said, bring it on up to the shop. We'll figure out how to do it. And it looks awesome. So Cole loves that. He has a great time.
I might have the itch to get in the actual car someday. Right,
Well,
follow in his footsteps.
I'll tell you, I took him to the Auburn Mall show this year, and he was screeching because he saw a Lightning McQueen microd. And actually, it's funny. He was actually talking about it earlier tonight. He goes, "Daddy, I want to see the picture of me sitting in Lightning McQueen." And yeah, we're probably in trouble there.
Oh yeah, and my wife will not let my daughter do that. My
Yeah,
wife is like, no, 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 because of the money. The money is tough.
yeah, it's gonna be a tough sell, but I think I, I could very well see kind of the same situation that I did when I was growing up racing is, you can kind of get to a certain point financially, but then there is that plateau before you either have to be independently wealthy or have a lot of really good friends that want to be sponsored. Otherwise I just don't know. And I'll say this, I have so much respect for the guys that do it, that make it work. Cause I look at myself back then, or even, thinking of, putting my own kid in something like that. I don't know how those guys do it. I don't know how they make it work, but I love that they do. I respect that they do. Cause
Absolutely.
it gives us something to cheer for. And, selfishly for me, it gives me a great job to get to go to the races. So
Right. So when you were just making that transition over to announcing, did you have anybody you leaned on or looked up to, or someone that mentored you to show
yeah.
you the ropes?
Yeah, for sure. There was a few guys. I before I even got into announcing, I had a real interest uh to do like this, to podcast, and so did that for a couple of years. And when I finally an opportunity came about, and I tell you one guy that was really encouraging when I was just like doing race reporting and doing the podcast was Dan Harpel, who was the promoter at was then called Yates County Speedway. And I wanted so badly to break in as an announcer somewhere. They were all set. They had an announcer, his son announced, but Dan would let me come do whatever I wanted to do on the media side, get interviews from drivers, come report on races, do live updates on our Facebook page. And really, I think without that open door, without that encouragement, I might have given up on seeking out something in announcing. But through that, after Dan was out and Mike Jackson took over and renamed it Black Rock Speedway, Mike was a brand new promoter who needed an announcer, and took a chance on a young kid who had no experience at all. Said I called him up and I just kind of shot my shot one day and said, "Hey, I know you're a new promoter. I don't know if you're looking for an announcer, but I know a young guy who would really love a shot to try it." And the rest is history. But in terms of mentors, I mean, God, for years, I rode to the races to Dundee with Doug Madison, who used to do Chasing Racing with Jack Christensen, who was friends with Mel Thomas. So all of those guys, I grew up with racing and being in the sport. And whether it was Jack and Doug doing their radio show. Mel's been an announcer. He's done his own type of radio deal. But I'll tell you that the one guy that I really leaned on when I got the job as an announcer, and actually this guy called and vouched for me when really I'd never announced before, and that was Gary Montgomery. He and I lived in the same town. We both grew up in Penn Yan, which for half of my life I never knew. I didn't realize we lived in the same town, but he was the guy that we heard at Canandaigua, and he was the guy that I saw on TV. and had no idea the guy lived in our town. It was pretty incredible. Um, but yeah, he was a huge mentor because, when I got the job at BlackRock, I was, I was okay at podcasting, but podcasting and announcing races are two different things. And so between, Mel was my first announcing partner at BlackRock. And so between working with him in the job at the track, and then having Gary to always lean on to say, Gary, you're a legend. Like, what can you teach me? What can I learn? And Gary never really gave me like announcing techniques. You would have a conversation with him and you would understand the things you need to do to be a great announcer. And it was never, you need to raise your voice at this point, or you need to get the crowd engaged at this point. It was, go to the track, do your homework, go through the pits, walk the pits and talk to the drivers, get those stories, get their sponsors, learn what they do for a living. Those are the things that will, make the difference. I will say that, my style of announcing is, I probably not for everybody, and probably some who are broadcasters for a profession could probably carve me up and spit me out on technique, and maybe I don't do this or that right. But for me, I am a racer. I'm excited about this stuff. Like, you could literally, we could go race wheelbarrows out in the backyard, and I would find that exciting. The competition,
Right.
um and I think you'll appreciate this too, is, I think coming from that background as a racer, like when somebody like yourself or somebody else in your division, let's say they lost an engine last week, and it took them all week, and they had to eat macaroni and cheese and hot dogs all week long because we had to buy parts to get the race car fixed. Like, I I I appreciate that story, and when I hear those stories, I want to share those, because the fans in the grandstands or those watching on the video stream, they don't always get that insight. They don't always understand those stories that go into, hey, Bradley Steinrock won a race tonight, and this is why you need to understand just how big that is. They had a terrible week last week. They had bad luck the week before. They overcame all of it, and here he is now in victory lane tonight. That is how we connect fans to what we do.
So going into that Black Rock, your first race, what
Yep.
were the nerves like? You got packed crowd,
Oh, I didn't know what I was doing, man. I'll be honest with you. Now,
packed crowd.
I do have some recordings of that first night. I've got, like Mel's DVD from that night. I go back and listen to it and I cringe a little bit because, you can tell I'm brand new. I mean, as far as calling a race, I was okay. I wasn't terrible, but I also, like, it was very overwhelming. Like, I wanted so badly to be an announcer, but until you're sitting in that seat at 7 o'clock on race night, you don't understand like just how much is going on. I'd never worked in a tower, like now BlackRock's a little different because the announcer's booth is kind of on its own, but you are right next to the officials tower. But I'd never worked in a tower. I never, I'm just trying to think of like simple things. Like, I didn't know if I should just, hey, it's 7 o'clock and the track's ready. Do I go into opening ceremony, or do I need to wait for somebody to tell me? Like, those are all things I didn't know.
Right.
The first time that we didn't know if a driver was okay in an accident, I remember Greg Hickson, who's the race director at Canandaigua right now. He was the race director at BlackRock, and him and I, it took us the first half of the season to get to a point where we could communicate with one another, and in those situations, to help me out as an announcer, to pass that information when it's appropriate to the fans. So there's a lot of that, that goes well beyond a race call, that you can tell I was brand new. But
I can only imagine having that many because I was never the the best at public speaking. Like even I'll give for an example, I won that race. I didn't even thank my sponsors.
Yeah,
My nerves were so high I didn't even thank my sponsors.
sure,
I had to
sure.
have Doug Elkins come in the pits the next week, interview me, luckily, and I got to thank him then. But
Yeah,
your nerves get so high, you forget stuff, you stumble words. It's
it's a
crazy.
blur.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yep.
So
No, I
transitioning over,
yep.
how did you become the announcer at Land of Legends? How did that come about?
Well, that is a very good example of, you know, always trying to make connections as best you can and never knowing how a connection could impact you in the future. I met Paul Cole, who was a sponsor at BlackRock that first year that I was an announcer. And then met him the second year when Tyler bought the place in 2016. Paul was back again, but I met Paul, 2015, and didn't know a lot about the guy. Knew he sold generators. That was it. And
Yeah.
I heard at a race I was at. I remember a couple years back they ran like some one-off races at Paradise. I happened to see Paul that night at Paradise, and I think I was doing Victory Lane that night. Somebody else was announcing, and I was doing Victory Lane. And I ran into Paul, and he said, he goes, "Hey, I know you, write articles for Race Chaser," and he goes, "I've got a story that I can't share yet, but just something to keep in mind." And he told me that he was going to be the promoter at Canandaigua Motorsports Park. He was changing the name to Land of Legends, and so uh, I said, "Yeah, let me know when it's okay, and I'd love to write about it. That's going to be a big deal. Canandaigua was a big deal around these parts." And so that's kind of how I met Paul. And then 2018, I was my last year at Woodhall. I was happy at Woodhall. I enjoyed working for Ted and Brandy White. Great people. They took good care of me. But I got word at the end of the season that Land of Legends was looking for an announcer. And I mean, holy cow, what a dream. Dundee has always been my home track. That's where I grew up going to the races. But when finances allowed, we went to Canandaigua as much as we could. And I'll be honest with you, I obviously was interested in the job, but there's a part of me, and I'll be completely honest with you, there's still times that I don't feel I'm at that level to work at a place like that. Like I've I grew up trying to be better at announcing. I worked at Outlaw, worked at Woodhall, um, you know, made a lot of friends there and got to hone my craft, but uh, I still have always felt a little bit of this. There's a term for it, and now, of course, I'm trying to think of it and lost my train of thought there. But there's like imposter syndrome is what it's called. I always feel like when I wanted to call Paul and ask about that job at Land of Legends, I thought, I've got this imposter syndrome going on. I don't think I belong there. I'm not ready for, a place like that. That's a job that somebody like Shane Andrews should have, Paul Small, guys that are well established that do this stuff. I'm probably not even close to being there yet. And him and Greg Emerson called me up and said, "Hey, let's meet at Denny's and have a chat." So we've met at a Denny's in Geneva, which is kind of funny because when I got my first announcing job at BlackRock, I met Mike Jackson at a Denny's. So there's something about the Denny's restaurant
Good luck.
that's been good luck for me. um, but anyway, I met with them and they asked questions. They said, "Hey, what would you do in this situation or that situation?" And at that point, Paul had been the promoter for a year, and so I left that meeting with them. I felt good about it, but I'm still had that thinking like, I don't know if this is gonna work out or not. And And then Paul called and said, "Hey, um, we're in if you're in. We know that you're new and you still have some things to learn, especially up here, having not announced there for ever, but and have some drivers to learn. But we want to offer you the job and see what you can do with it." And that was a tough conversation to have with Ted and Brandy White. Because we had a good thing going at Woodhall, but Canandaigua, and it's not to say anything against any place I've ever worked before, but as a kid growing up, like, yeah, if you're gonna get a job in racing, you want to be working at one of those tracks that are the pillars of dirt motorsports. Like, there's just a cachet to that, like, yeah, you want that job if you can get it. And so I kind of explained that to them as, Land of Legends at that time was doing video streaming. They were doing pay-per-view at the time, and there was a part of me that wanted to do it for that reason too, because I wanted to get better at announcing, and I wanted opportunities to get noticed. And I don't know if announcing was something that I could take higher and higher. Who knows, but I felt like going to Canandaigua, a place of prestige, was a good way to try to get noticed if announcing was something that was going to take me a little further. And it was a hard decision, but it was the best decision I ever made, because I left Woodhall, and a year later, Ted and Brandy sold the track. And I say to this day, I'm so thankful that Paul offered me the job when he did, because if I hadn't got the offer at Land of Legends, and then Ted and Brandy sold Woodhall a year later, who knows where I would have ended up? Maybe I wouldn't be an announcer at all. So, um, yeah, we're really thankful for that opportunity. I know that's a long-winded story, but that's kind of how it all came to be. It was, Paul remembered me from being a reporter and being an announcer for Mike Jackson. And again, I still say that even though I had a couple years announcing experience, Paul really took a chance on me, because I'd only worked in the business a couple years. And so, that was a chance that he took on me, and I'm forever grateful for it.
And then you did have some big shoes to fill there too, because Shane did announce there when it was Canandaigua Motorsports Park.
Yeah, he sure did. And I'm glad you said that, because and I tell Shane this all the time, and I think it makes Shane uncomfortable when I tell him this, but I said, Shane always told me that Canandaigua is Gary's house. And I say to Shane all the time that Canandaigua may always be Gary's house, but Shane, you built an addition onto that house that made the house 2 times the size that it was before. And that's not to say anything against Gary. It's Shane took that torch and made it bigger, and made Canandaigua the place you had to be on Saturday nights. And I feel like, now I'm not saying that I've done that at all, but I'm saying there's that, you get that feeling of the torch has been passed to you. And people say all the time that when you go somewhere, you do a job, or you get involved with something, get involved with a project, when you're done with it, you want to leave it in a much better place than what you found it. And that's what I strive for, because I know that's what Shane did when he took the reins, from Gary. And after Shane's involvement at Land of Legends, kind of trying to pass the torch to me, and I still converse with Shane. That's one thing I do every opening night, every year, is either text or call Shane, just to check in, just to say hello, and to say thank you for being a good mentor, and being that guy that was willing to pass the torch and answer any questions I ever had. And he still to this day does. Anytime I go to a rock concert, I text Shane, because Shane's a big rock music guy, and forever grateful for that mentorship and friendship.
So that first year there at Land of Legends, were there any challenges that you faced that you didn't face anywhere else because it is a bigger venue?
It is. And like I said, it's I think in some levels I still deal with it today is that imposter syndrome, that feeling like, that maybe I don't belong here, or maybe this, I'm not at that level to be doing this job. I'm confident in my skills, I'm confident in my announcing, but that first year was absolutely a challenge. Because you're trying to learn a whole new pit area. Now, there are some guys that I knew from other tracks I had worked at. So, guys like oh, geez, guys like Derek Pozziadlo. I've known him. We grew up in Penn Yan. I've known him for years. So guys like that, I know. Guys like the Gueries, the Back Row Gang. I've known them from doing the podcast, doing interviews. Knew those guys well. Jim Schuyler. God, grew up racing around the Schuyler family. Some of my favorite memories as a young kid before I was actually driving cars was anytime the 57J won, there's a big party in Hemrod, and getting
Yep.
down there to enjoy a few of those. When I probably should have been at home in bed, was a good time. So people like that were in the pit area that I knew, but there was a lot of drivers that have, pretty decent history at that racetrack that I didn't know, that I've needed to get to know over the years. And that first year, it's overwhelming. You're in a new place. Oh, by the way, you're announcing at Canandaigua, which will go down in history in dirt modified racing. And oh, by the way, it's on pay-per-view. So people are paying to watch you do your job, and if you do a crappy job, they're going to let you know about it on social media. So um yeah, that first year was a challenge. I had to, learn to work with a new announcing partner, and I got to work alongside Wendy Emerson, which that was not a challenge. It was just a um when I worked with Mel at BlackRock, we tag teamed the announcing, but working with Wendy taught me a whole different role as an announcer, because I was heavily focused on the racing announcing, and Wendy would do the sponsor reads. She would get the fan engagement going. She would do the interviews with the sponsor and the 50/50 beneficiary. And so that was something new for me to get used to. And I think for Wendy too, she had to get used to somebody that's nuts like me, who's just diehard racing, and I was
Yep.
screaming and standing on the stool when I saw a good race going on. So I think some of that was challenging, but at the same time, she taught me a lot about doing those sponsor reads, interacting with the sponsors and the 50/50 folks. And so I learned a ton from her that year, but it just, um, I tell people in my current work when I'm doing education on coding and documentation, sometimes when you're learning things, you're drinking through a fire hose. And I think that was my first year at Canandaigua. I was so nervous about being at this new place that I had put such a pedestal that
Right.
um that first year it was kind of hard to sit back and enjoy, because you're thrown in it, and plus think about all these fans that are in the grandstands who who grew up on Gary Montgomery, who grew up on Joe Murata, who got to enjoy racing in their middle years with Shane Andrews. And now this kid who used to work at Woodhall, where the hell is Woodhall? Now he's our announcer? Like, what the hell is this? Like, he's saying top shelf where mama hides the cookies, and oh, that was a Code Brown moment. And like, who the hell is this kid? Like,
Right. Right.
so I mean, there's all this that's going on. And I think that I really probably paid too much attention to trying to make everybody happy and try to emulate things that Shane did, because that's what people were used to. It took me a couple years to just say, you know what, I am as I am, and that's all I am, and you take it or leave it. I mean, this is me, and I'm not going to apologize for it. So um but it took some time. That first year was, oh my goodness. I even go back and watch some of those races and say, oh man, like I've definitely worked on my craft a lot since 2019. So
Right, there's that what you just said brings me to my next question here. You got the two catchphrases that everybody knows. You got the top shelf where Mama hides the cookies, and then you got the by the grace of God and 800 horsepower. Where did you come up with? I know the Gary Montgomery had that, and then the top shelf where Mama hides the cookies. Where did you get that from?
yeah, so that is a borrowed line from Buffalo Sabres announcer who's since passed, Rick Jenneret. He used that line to call hockey games. Anytime a player shot a goal and it went toward the top of the net, he would say, "Oh, he caught it top shelf where Mama hides the cookies." And I grew up, a big Sabres fan. When I was in college in Rochester, had a really good friend of mine that would get us tickets to go to Amerks games downtown, and so kind of watched the Ryan Millers, Thomas Vaneks, Jason Pominville. We watched them come through Rochester and then eventually make their way to Buffalo. So I was a big Buffalo hockey fan, and the very first year at Land of Legends, and actually, I will say that I'll go back. This was even before I got to Land of Legends. We were doing a lot of iRacing broadcasts, my brother and and I pulled it out then, and um, somebody said, "Oh, you must be a Sabres fan." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And they said that's cool that you can use that line that RJ uses for hockey and make it work for racing. They said it comes right off the tongue. It sounds good and it's exciting. And I said, yeah, I just tried it one night. I said I might say this and never say it again. But it stuck. The guys that we were calling races for iRacing, they loved it. They thought it was hilarious, and it just stuck. So it's not an original line. I will never claim that I came up with it, although I use it. It's in my tool belt now. But that is very much paying homage to Rick Jenneret.
Yeah, and then there's you also did the CRSA series, right? You were the series announcer for that. How challenging was that? It's a whole different because we didn't have 305 sprints at Land of Legends for years, and then I think it came in early 2010s somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you, the story of that class is really incredible because, not long before I took over as announcer, there were a few lean years where I didn't think 305 sprints were going to make it. So, tip of the cap to Jeremy Corcoran and Paul Cole to, you know, believe in that program and keep it going, because now it's the fastest growing class anywhere. I mean,
Yeah, they
it's
definitely took a chance on it.
yeah, it's incredible, and that's really paid off. And certainly Mike Emhoff has spearheaded that effort from the sanctioning body and touring side. But announcing for them was a lot of fun because it gave me an opportunity to be an announcer that was a traveling announcer, something I'd really never done before. And I'll tell you, the challenges with that is when you're an announcer for a traveling series, you if you're going to a track you've never been to, you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know if I remember the very first time I went to Penn Can Speedway, the announcer there, Roy Sova, who is a legendary announcer both on the pavement and the dirt side. I walked in that first night, and now mind you, I had videoed at Oswego for years with Mel, but never really got to converse with Roy. I might say hello here and there. And I think he knew I was on the video crew, but that's about as far as it went. So my first time there as a sprint car announcer, I walked in and I'm like, wow, I need to make a really good impression. Roy is one of the legendary voices. And if I screw up in front of Roy or I do something stupid, he's going to tell all of his old school announcing buddies and I'm going to get a terrible name. and walked in, couldn't have been a better experience. He was so complimentary. But another thing as a traveling announcer that you don't know, like, is there going to be a seat for you at the desk or at the table, or do you like take their seat and then walk away and let them come back in? There's those challenges. Now, at while I was announcing, I was also the PR guy. So I was writing the race report and I was doing results, doing the social media updates. And, another challenge there is you don't know what kind of space you have to work with. Some tracks, again, you're trading seats with the main announcer for the track. So I was tucked in a corner doing updates on my cell phone. If I was lucky, there might be an extra table or an extra space at the desk where I could set my laptop up and write my report and do the results. But there's some places you don't know what the setup is. You don't know what you're walking into. And something I started doing my second of 3 years working for them is I started bringing my own headset with me, because equipment, you never know what you're working with at a racetrack. So some places, I just felt more comfortable using my own headset and plugging into their system. But there again, that poses a challenge because you don't know what system they have. You don't want to screw anything up by any means. Like, as a traveling series, whether you're the announcer, the tour manager, whatever, you don't want to come in and be the story for the wrong reason. So,
Right.
there was always nerves about plugging into somebody else's system and screwing it up. And, but yeah, I mean, that was a challenge. And there again, that tour of sprint car drivers is a group of folks that, unless they raced at Canandaigua, I didn't know them very well. So I
Right.
had to learn them, had to walk, do that walk through the pits, constantly getting updates from them, chumming it up, telling jokes, cracking jokes, and got to know those guys, really well. And, now when they come to Canandaigua, now I feel like they're family, because I've gotten to know
Right.
them throughout the years. But that's a challenge all in its own. You never know what you're walking into, and you want to be as polite as possible, but you want to do the best job that you can. Um, but I'll say, guys like Chris Moore that used to work at Fonda and Utica,
Yep.
he was always amazing to work with. Shane at Weedsport, when the sprints got to start going to Weedsport, Shane's amazing. He's a great mentor, so that was always easy. I'm leaving out a bunch of places that's probably not fair. Oh, Leon at Afton. Anytime I went to Afton, Leon was always very complimentary as well, and was always super helpful. Leon was a guy that, Afton, their tower doesn't have a lot of space for the announcer. And he was always to say, here, take my seat. I'm going to go take a break. I'm going to take a leak, or maybe I'll just stand behind you and watch and kind of spot for things on the racetrack. There's been a lot of really, really cool people that I got to work with as a traveling announcer. That was a lot of fun.
I feel like the another challenge of being on a touring series maybe is the diversity of people. So you got a different like Canandaigua, they know you already.
Yeah.
They know your sayings. They got different beliefs than someone like at Penn Can. So you saying something, you don't know how it's gonna interact or how it's gonna coincide with them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And anytime I went someplace for the first time, there was always that nerves. Like, I remember I talked about that imposter syndrome. That would just go sky high when I was at a track I've never announced at before, because I would have those thoughts before the first race of the night was, man, these guys are going to think I'm the biggest boob that ever existed. Like,
Right.
they've not heard my sayings. They've not heard me read off a list of sponsors for these guys that I'm used to doing. And again, people get used to what they know, get used to what they like. And, so, for somebody to come in and do or say things differently, Yeah, you're always worried about that. Yep.
Man, that's got to be challenging because
Yeah.
you could do a great job, but you got that one person who's gonna rain. It's a rain cloud. They're a rain cloud over your head.
Yeah.
How do you handle that kind of situation? Like somebody, because you've got to have someone message you or talk to you at the track, like, man, just this isn't for you or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I handle it a lot better now than I used to. When I first got started, I didn't take criticism well. I would, very easily wanna fight back when somebody, would say something that wasn't particularly kind. When I first got started, I always say I was young and dumb. If somebody wanted to tell me I was the worst announcer in the world, I'd be the first one to get on Facebook and say, all right, Jackwagon, why don't you come up here and give it a try? The microphone's always on. And now, now it's kind of it's almost worse now with social media. Now I'm not saying social media is bad because I'm not one of those people that thinks that. I think sometimes social media is only bad as you make it. And for some folks they make it pretty bad for themselves. So but you know now I finally, it's taken me a long time, Brad. I'm gonna be honest. It's taken me a really long time and a lot of growth to just laugh at it now, because at the end of the day, unless there's, spouting off on, geez, this guy didn't get the hometown right, or that sponsor name's not right. Okay, I'll take that back and fix it, but if they want to say, this dude's a clown, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He uses these stupid, dumb catchphrases all the time. That's getting old. I remember actually not long ago, a year or two ago, I said something about, we make a joke at Canandaigua now that when the camera crew catches a wreck and we get multiple views of it, I say, oh, Jim Mullen gets a cookie or Mike Yanni gets a cookie because he got the accident. We were able to replay it. And a fan in the grandstands, and I didn't hear it, obviously, I was in the tower, but I was told about it afterwards. We had a wreck where all three cameras had it, and we got to show all three replays. And I said, "These guys everybody gets cookies tonight." And apparently, a fan screamed toward the tower, "What is this, a bakery or a racetrack?" And so I heard about it afterwards, and I kind of laughed about it. But when I was young, I probably wasn't the best about criticism like that. And like you said earlier, I'm more apt to get that criticism as a new announcer because people are used to what they've been, getting for the last X number of years. So, come in as a new guy, I really should have expected to get some of that pushback and just relax, let it go. Like, not a big deal, Um and I think for somebody like Shane or Gary, they might not have been able to offer me that feedback because they were so established and so well liked that I don't think they got a lot of that over the course of their careers. But yeah, no, it was a challenge, but I would say confidently that I'm better about that today than I used to be.
So in my opinion, having a good announcer makes the race a little better, right? So, because coming from an announcer yourself, would you feel, because before you announce, you heard people announce, like, for example, I'm not a sprint car fan whatsoever. I've never, because we never really have them in New York. It's more of a Pennsylvania, out here in California kind of thing.
Yeah.
But watching the World of Outlaws with Johnny Gibson being the announcer and saying quick time, that just makes you tune right in. Or Shane Andrews with the Super Dirt Car Series,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. So do you feel that way too? Like the having a good announcer makes you tune into the race a little bit more. Like another example is when I think it was maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Ethan Gray threw a slider in 3 and 4. That made everybody tune in. I got goosebumps from that.
Yeah.
That made me tune into that race a little bit more than probably I would have if there's unless I guess with boring announcer.
Yeah. You know, I think most announcers would tell you that, the announcer's not the show, but the announcer can certainly complement the show. Um, and you can go to any racetrack and you can see a hell of a race. Um, and when you leave that night, you say, man, that racing was really good. But there is an element to having a good race that has somebody excited talking about it too. That just takes that, yeah, that was a good race, to taking it up that next notch. Um, so I would agree with that, and the way that I've always looked at this goes back to the days of operating a DJ company with my father. We would market ourselves as wedding DJs, and we would tell people when we met them, you need to be very selective about your wedding DJ, because the DJ can make or break your reception. The family, the friends, they're coming to see you. That it's the big day. The DJ's not they're not the main event. That's the bride and groom. But how many weddings have you ever been to where the DJ was maybe not the greatest, and it kind of put a damper on the event, like
Yep.
not the reason for being there, but that party afterwards. There's always that big hype for the reception. And if you get one that maybe is a little bit of a dud, it's kind of a letdown. And so I carried that right into announcing. Um, and that's how I approach it is, no, the announcer's not the show, but they can really, make or break that show just by making things exciting. Or like you said, you made me pay way more attention to what was happening than I probably was before that. Whether it's me using a higher inflection on what I'm saying, or at the times when the race is so damn good, I'm screaming. I know there's some people that really don't care for that, but I just don't know any other way. Like, I'm excited, and I think if I'm excited about it, everybody should be excited about it. So, I'm not there to be the show by any means, but would I agree that, part of my job is to make it exciting and make people? Absolutely. There's a really great NASCAR announcer by the name of Dave Moody. Does a ton of NASCAR stuff, has a Sirius XM show, all that stuff. He recently said, and a couple of my buddies from up at Ashweekend said this recently too. The role of the announcer is to make the fans want to come back next week and buy a ticket to come again. And that hits home with me so much, because
Mhm.
that's what it boils down to, is racing is entertainment. And we're not creating entertainment. I'm reacting to what's happening on the racetrack. And if there is anything that I can do that complements that makes it, you know, even a little bit more exciting, the people in the grandstands are going to have that feeling too, like you described, and say, geez, this was a lot of fun. We got to come back again. Or in our case at Land of Legends, with the free video stream, I can't tell you how many fans we have made by giving the stream away for free. And people have said, if the racing is half as good in person as it is on the video stream, we have to go. Like, we have to go in person at least once. And I've met a lot of fans that have done that. Last year, I met a fan that drove in from New Jersey past 6 different racetracks on his way to Canandaigua. But because of what he saw in the video stream and how exciting it was on video, he said, I got to go. I got to go see it in person and see if it's just as good, if not better. And fortunately for him, it was. So,
And it's not even just United States either. We got people watching from England, New Zealand, Australia.
yeah.
It's all over the place. It's wild. You're reaching a broad group of people.
It is. We've become really popular with, fans that are from the area that don't live here anymore. And something I think you can appreciate is we have fans that are, military service based, that are based all over the world, and our free stream is still a way for them to be connected with what's going on at home. And another example of that is Frank Wary Jr.'s sister, Kate. They've been stationed all over the world at different points, and they're tuning in every week to watch Uncle Frankie. And because I know them and I know that story, you'll hear me reference that a few times, a night, because, it's incredible that, especially with the time change, depending on where they might be. I know Kate's messaged me before to say, "Hey, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're watching Uncle Frankie to see how he does." And it's just it's cool. That live stream has really changed the game for us at Land of Legends, and I'm stoked to be a part of that, and to see what that's done. When when Paul said we're going to give it away for free, you wouldn't believe the people that thought, well, there goes Land of Legends. They're going to go under in a year.
I bet.
You're not going to sell tickets giving video away for free. And it didn't happen overnight, but 5 years later, 6 years later, wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah, that was a good move. Um, so I mean, being an announcer's got to be tough, right? Because you're announcing the races. You got drivers out there. Are announcers, as an announcer, do you have like a favorite driver? Are you allowed to have a favorite driver? Because you got the biased opinion on things that would upset people, but you used to have a favorite driver growing up, and that driver might still race. So can he still be your favorite driver, or is it tough to you got to go in between with those kinds of things?
I can have a favorite driver, but not at Canandaigua, if that makes sense.
Right.
I mean, if I go to Brewerton, I go to Weedsport, I go to Oswego, I can let my the Dr. Danny Johnson flag fly, Um, but no, I don't have favorites at Canandaigua, but I will say this, and I know there's a lot of announcers that feel this way. I don't have favorite drivers, and I don't root for drivers, but I root for good stories. I root for things that are going to be exciting in that race. So for me, I'm not rooting for a driver, but I'm rooting for whatever drivers are going to stick it 3 or 4 wide going into turn 3, because that's going to make it exciting, and people are going to love that. So no, I don't have favorite drivers, but I definitely root for whatever's going to be a good story or whatever's going to make that race exciting. And that's hard because you know um I don't necessarily have favorites, but I have a lot of people that I'm friendly with, that I pull for. I want to see everybody do well. Anytime, I'll give you an example. Anytime Derek Pozziadlo from Penyan runs top 5 in the big blocks at Canandaigua, you damn sure bet I'm going to make a big deal about it. Because I've known Derek, almost all of his racing career. I worked with him as an ER nurse in Geneva at a certain period of time in my nursing career. So anytime he runs up front, I'm going to make a big damn deal about it, because, he's just a great guy, and that's a great story. But does the fact that I've known Derek forever, does that mean that, I'm pulling for him as an announcer because I want him to win and beat all the drivers? No, I want to see him do well because that's a great story. Now the one that people that I get critiqued on as having favorites is, I talked about my history growing up in the Carrick family. So everybody assumes that Danny Carrick's my favorite guy out
Got
there in the
family
Ronnie
out there.
Scotts. And
Yeah.
now that's the same deal. Yes, I cannot change that I am a member of the Carrick family. I cannot change that. And do I get excited when Danny does good? Yeah, I do. But I get excited when Danny does good because when Danny's doing good, he is a consistent guy who comes from the back of the field in the handicap every week. And I get excited when he's doing well because that means he's carving his way through the field and making my job as an announcer real easy. So that's one that I just, people can, hammer on me about that as much as they want. I get it. But again, there's nothing I can do about that. Like
Yeah,
at
it's
the end of the day, the guy's family, but I treat him as an announcer the same I do everybody else. So yeah, it's not a thing that you can have favorites, but I found it real easy to do my job by just rooting for good stories.
so do you have a is there a way to have a favorite class maybe or a favorite series that you follow? Because I don't know, for me, watching like the Super Dirt Car series or the big blocks go around there, anybody can win on any given week. Especially this year, I just saw the other day that Dalton Slack's going to Land of Legends on Saturdays. You got Matt Williamson, all the top guys, Matt Shepard, Alex Payne's an up and coming guy who's really good, even with the Super Dirt Car series guys. So, I mean, having that favorite class or favorite series makes your job a little easier too.
Yeah, for sure. And I've not made any bones about the fact that over the course of my announcing career, I'm a full fender guy. I love it. That's what my dad grew up racing. That's what the Carrick family grew up racing, and I love every opportunity I get to try to highlight those full fender guys. Those guys that are, working that blue collar job during the week to be able to pay for a race car, to be able to come out and have fun for a 6 lap heat race and a 15 lap feature. So the hobby stock and the street stock guys and anybody that's listened to me as an announcer or have known me for the last 10 years knows that I'm a sucker for the full fenders. I just love them. They put on a good show. And again, for all those reasons I just mentioned, that's a favorite of mine. Um, I'd be remiss not to say the sprint cars too, because I traveled with them and I have that connection to them now. But that's not to say that I don't love the sportsmen in the big blocks. I do, they're a big piece of what we do at the Land of Legends. But for me, if you pushed me in a corner and said, give me an answer, yeah, it's gonna be the full fender classes. I'm sorry.
It's understandable. So, so are you gonna keep going with the announcing thing? Are you like looking to possibly elevate up the ranks? Are you trying to go to like a big series, maybe taking over the Super Dirt Car series after Mike Warren's done? Or have you ever looked into something like that, like possibly moving up?
I think a couple years ago, I would have given you a different answer and I would have said yes. I want every opportunity that I can get. If there's an opportunity to move up, I want it. I want to do it. I would have told you that a couple years ago. And that's not to say that I wouldn't, entertain, if Mike said, "Hey, I'm all done," and my phone rang with interest, I would take the phone call, and I'd have to really think about that, but when I first got into announcing and when I first started at Canandaigua, I thought, boy, this is going to be a really good opportunity for me to show my stuff and be able to maybe get some opportunities. Who knows where it could lead to. And I think I'm in such a good place right now at Canandaigua on Saturday nights that uh, that's what I get excited about. The opportunity to move up or to do something at a higher level, that just doesn't drive me anymore. It's not to say that if, hey, like I look at a guy like Todd Morey or Paul Small that got some really cool opportunities last year to go work some truck series events for MRN on the radio. Man, if there was opportunity like that popped up, I would absolutely do that, even if it was just to go do it once and say that I did it. But am actively seeking opportunities to go do bigger and better things? Not really, man. I think I'm doing pretty bigger and better things at Canandaigua and what we've got going there. Um, and the other piece to it too is, when I got into announcing at Canandaigua, I had a good steady job, but if an opportunity to do racing full time, either on the media or the announcing side, had come up, I might have taken it because I at that time I really wanted to do this stuff full time, and that has definitely changed over the last couple years for me. And I kind of relate this to Shane Andrews, because Shane the same thing happened to Shane. He got an incredible opportunity at his current job working with Briggs and Stratton and Ferris Mowers, and Shane's had an incredible opportunity, and because of the opportunity and the work that he's doing with those folks, that has kind of taken priority, and he's cut back on what racing things that he does, and I'm kind of in that similar boat right now. I've got a really good job as a healthcare consultant right now that I can do that, pays the light bill, does all the things, and it allows me to go racing on Saturday nights. Now, working this job, I don't know that I could peel away and go do, a full time doing races during the middle of the week and doing things like that. So, like I said, I'd have to, really put some time and consideration into that. But, it's kind of, when I first got started there, yeah, I wanted to go do bigger, better things. I wanted to do that. But now I'm so happy with what I'm doing, both in my full-time job and my racing work, that um, I'm just having a good time where I'm at. And you'd have to really make an incredible offer to peel me away. So
So, just to go ahead and end this here, there's a lot of publicity that goes through Land of Legends, right? We all know Greg Hickson loves his hot dogs. What is your favorite track food?
ooh, good question. Um, hmm. Well, I'll tell you, it's hard for me to pick a favorite at Canandaigua because on most race nights, I don't generally eat food at the track because, by the time I get there and start working the pits, it's not quite yet dinner time, and by the time dinner time rolls around, I'm busy working. Um, but so I would have to probably pick something from other tracks that I've gone to. Um, and so I would have to say the port burger at Weedsport. You can't really beat that. Any track that serves pizza logs, that's a staple. You got to do that. And so I would probably have to say one of those two options. There's definitely some of our food truck vendors that come to Canandaigua that I'm a big fan of oh goodness, the Dandino's hot dog stand that comes. Big fan of those guys. They do great work. Um, Red Osier, that prime rib sandwich. I mean, good grief, you can't beat that. And to top it off with one of Trevor's Mighty Boba bubble teas, man, that's a good night at the races at Canandaigua. But it's hard for me to say because there's so often times that I don't really get a chance to partake in the concessions because I'm busy working. But yeah, I'd have to say that.
All right, last question here. So there's a bunch of young kids out there in the crowd that listen to you. You got the flaggers, but there's kids that have dreams and aspirations of becoming an announcer one day. Is there any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple of things that I think have helped me along the way, and these are not my own original thoughts. These are things that were instilled in me by some of those guys I mentioned earlier. Number one, you got to be present. You've got to, If you want to break into announcing, you want to get into that business, you've got to be present. And what helped me was that year that I was just there at Yates County Speedway every week, working the pits, doing stories, writing articles, doing Facebook posts. If I hadn't, kind of pounded the pavement there, so to speak, I might not have gotten noticed, and Mike Jackson might not have known who I was to give me a chance as an announcer. And then the other thing, which I think is utmost importance when you're actually get an opportunity to announce, is you have got to know your pit area. You've got to go around and get those stories. I'll tell you, and I'm not pointing fingers because there's a lot of them that do it now, but it is nails on a chalkboard to me when somebody makes a post that says, "Hey, if you're planning on racing here, give us your division, your car number, your hometown, 3 sponsors, so that we can update our files." What are we doing? We're supposed to update our files when we walk through the pits. And when I walk through with my spreadsheet that I printed out and I cross out and update the information, or Tom Skibinski says, "Hey, I got this update on this driver," and we compare notes with each other. Um, so to me, that's it, when you get a job as an announcer, that's the most important thing you can do. You could be terrible at calling a race, but if you know the drivers and you can spit out some stories that help fans connect to that driver, or make that family feel good, or make their fans feel good, or the fan walks away saying, "I learned something tonight that I didn't know about that guy." Or maybe, "Hey, I didn't know they blew an engine a couple weeks ago, and had to piece it together to get back to the race. I didn't know that." If you can do that, you can do this job and you can do it well. So that's what I would say is you've gotta walk the pit area. You just there's just no way around it. Some guys will make that Facebook post. Some guys will create a spreadsheet online, a Google sheet, and they'll put the link and say, "Hey, drivers, fill out your information. Do my work for me." I don't care for that.
Well, I appreciate you coming on,
Yeah.
being the first guest of this new podcast journey that we're starting here. I know that your brother and your father be looking down on you right now, proud. You've
Yeah,
done an
man.
amazing job at Land of Legends, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I every Saturday I go there. Um, I still to this day, I walk into that tower thinking I'm going to see Brad sitting there at the graphics computer, and every time that he's not, I walk in that tower saying, "I'm going to do something tonight that Brad would be proud of." Or, I've got their picture right next to me in the tower. So when I do that lap 3 tribute for the modifieds, a lot of people thought I was going to stop that after that first season, after they passed away. And I told Art and Paul, I said, "If it's okay with you guys, I'd like to do that as long as I'm here." And I'm very lucky that they're on board with doing that, and allow me to do that. Racing was everything to our family. Sometimes to the family's detriment. But it's what I do that I feel close to them, and it really means a whole heap that they allow me to do that. So every time I'm there, if it's making fun with a fan in the crowd, that's something my dad would do when he was announcing demo derbies or a tractor pull or whatever. So when people hear that crowd interaction, or I'm trying to have fun with the crowd, or I try to get them to do the wave or whatever, um, every time that happens, no, that's a tip of the cap to my dad, because that's the kind of announcer that he was. And from the production side, the video work, the highlights that I put out on Facebook for the track, um, every time I do that, I'm doing something that I think my brother would be proud of. So it's yeah, I appreciate you saying that. That really means a lot.
Yeah, no problem. I just keep doing amazing things over there. I'll be watching every Saturday out here in California. Trust me.
I appreciate it, man. I'm glad that we've got that stream where you can do so. You can keep up with what's going on here. So
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Like the video? Comment down below on what your journey in racing has been like. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so that way you know when I upload videos.